Good morning. My name is Greg Little, superintendent from Mount Airy City Schools, and 3 years ago we made the decision to offer Mandarin Chinese to our high school students at Mount Airy High School. While I knew the program would be a success, there is no way I could have predicted what has happened since that first group of students took a leap of faith and registered for Chinese 1. The program is building momentum with both our students as well as the community and blossoming into something that I did not even dream was possible, because our program has evolved into so much more than just a classroom experience. For example, last summer we sent a group of students to represent the United States at an international youth summit. And you're going to hear from a couple of them in just a moment. But for 12 days, they learned alongside students from all around the world. And I can only imagine what impact that would have on me if I were a 15, 16, and 17-year-old, and to have that experience. And the impact that that's going to have on their futures will be exciting to see. In the fall, we hosted 23 Chinese principals, where our administrators exchanged best practices in education across cultures. And this winter, we will host 12 Chinese students. They will live with families and get a sense of what it's like to be an American teenager for a week. And of course, we are in the planning stages of a second trip for our students to go to China this spring. But I'm also excited about how our community has embraced this program. To be honest, I was unsure of how our community that's been so directly impacted by global outsourcing would be accepting, if they would even be accepting of bringing a Chinese program to Mount Airy. But what we discovered in our research was that our community had a number of local businesses that had deep international connections and roots, and they were thrilled that this opportunity was being provided to our students. And we've spoken to every civic organization we have in Mount Airy about Chinese. We've talked to the Mount Airy Ministerial Association, the Rotary Clubs, the Junior Women's League, you name it, we've presented. And time again, all we get is positive feedback about how excited they are that our students get this amazing opportunity. In fact, one local company has donated more than $10,000 to ensure the success of this program, specifically to help our students, who many of them have financial needs, have the chance to go travel internationally. Our conversation about critical languages really began as when we framed it, we started with the K-12 STEAM perspective. Now, we talked about STEM earlier, but we've added the A with the arts into STEAM, and that became the foundation of our conversation. So we started with the question, what would happen if we had the critical thinking and innovative problem solving that you have in STEAM and applied that same skills and strategies to a global context? This was a seismic shift for me in thinking, because I had always considered STEAM and global schools as two separate innovative strategies. But the more and more I learn about both of them, the more I'm convinced that they are intricately interwoven, because students today will face an economic and political future defined by globalization like no generation before them. We can no longer think in terms of either or when it comes to global schools and STEAM schools. Our students need both. And this is especially true in rural North Carolina, where our students may not have these rich cultural opportunities that those in urban areas have access to. You know, it's funny when I tell people about our Chinese program, inevitably they ask the question, why do kids from Mayberry need to learn to speak Chinese? Right? Well, we want our students to face a future that is defined by open doors. We want our students to see language and culture as an opportunity and not a barrier. And we want our students to have a global and cultural awareness that will allow them to create their own global footprint. Thank you again for having Mount Airy City Schools today. We are honored and privileged to be here, and you are in for a treat as you hear from two of our finest students who took the trip last summer to represent the United States at the International Youth Summit. So I'm gonna step off stage, but thank you again for being here.
Hi again, everyone. Oh, yay. think you can hear me because I can certainly hear myself. I am very, very pleased to be sitting here on the stage, sharing the stage this morning with Randall, Simmons, and Walker Hall, seniors at Mount Airy High School. Zhao Shenghao.
Zhao Shenghao. It's good morning in Chinese.
So we will get right to it. It is so incredible, as Dr. Little just said, that you all were able to have this fantastic opportunity. So we're happy to have you here and share so that we can all live vicariously through your experience. I know this is your first time flying, but what was going through your mind on this 14 to 15-hour flight? What's going through your mind as you're headed to China?
It was definitely a struggle. I've flown before. I've flown to Las Vegas, but that was like a 6-7 hour flight from South Carolina. So this flight was definitely really hard. We left about 1 o'clock in the morning from Mount Airy, took a bus to Raleigh, and left about 5:30 from there, and an hour-and-a-half flight to Detroit. So we started off, it wasn't that bad. And then we had a 4-hour layover in Detroit. So that's where it started. And then
Welcome to international travel.
and then a 14-hour flight straight shot to Shanghai. And it was grueling. But the whole time I could think, well, you know, it's going to be worth it. When we get to Shanghai, we're going to be able to see so many different things, and it would be really interesting when we got there.
Now, I should just mention, obviously, we were just all informed that you all are part of the foreign language program at your school, and you all chose Mandarin. Why did you choose that language? What inspired you?
I think for me, when I chose Mandarin, I was wanting to do something that was different from what everyone else was doing. When you go to a small town high school, if there's another language offered, it will be Spanish or something that's pretty basic. I figured with Chinese, it would give me a challenge that I could try to take on myself so that I could try to learn more about another language and culture than I could with just what we learn would learn in Spanish.
And did you choose, were you selected, or did you also decide for different reasons?
No, I'd always saw that, you know, people took Spanish. That was the only really language class that we offered at our high school for a long time before I came there. And when they said that we were offering Chinese, I jumped at it just for the fact that it, you know, was going to be that new experience, and it was going to be really interesting to learn about a culture that I had no idea about. I knew about Spanish culture, and I had experienced that a lot growing up, so it was easy to understand that, but to experience something I had no idea about beforehand was really interesting, in my opinion.
And you're interested in going into the technology field, is that right?
That'd be Walker.
Oh, that's Walker, so that'll be a leg up for you, yes?
Yes.
So, Walker, what cities did you visit while you were there, and what did you notice right away that was drastically different from being in the States?
To start, the cities we visited, we landed in Shanghai, and then from there we went to Suzhou for the most part of our trip. And then from there we went to Nanjing. We spent about a day in Shanghai, and then 4 days in Nanjing, and then about a week in Suzhou. As soon as we landed in China, the first thought I had was probably, wow, I'm in another place, completely foreign to me, and all I have that's familiar to me is just these 7 other people from our school. And of course, the first thing I would say I noticed aside from that would be people and traffic. There were a lot of people.
A lot of traffic, too.
More traffic
It was scary.
in Mount Airy, you mean? Really?
No, more traffic in Shanghai. It was scary.
So you were pretty well equipped, having been in the program for over a year, the foreign language program. What words or phrases would you say you used the most?
Well, definitely, we were fairly equipped. We can read and write a good amount of words. We can't speak fluently by any means. So I think one of the phrases that really helped me a lot in China was, or when we went and met with a Chinese person or saw anyone on the street or in a shopping center, we would say ni hao, hello, and they would immediately assume that we could speak fluent Chinese, which was not the case. And so we were luckily equipped with the phrase "wo de zhong wen bu hao," which means my Chinese is not very good. And to which they would still think we were fluent. So it was kind of, we never really got anywhere really. But I mean, at least they knew it wasn't that great. So it kind of, that's really the phrase I use most.
Great icebreaker, though. How about you? Did you use a word or phrase often?
I would probably say the phrase I use the most would be "dua xiao qian." We went to a lot of places to buy things, as you may have noticed. And
Someone tell.
when there, of course, not all the prices are listed, so you have to ask what the price is, and often they'll type it into a calculator because most people who go there don't understand the language. So just saying "dua xiao qian," being like, oh, this is 30 yuan, you're like, oh, okay, I know how much that is, I can pay for it. But maybe I can get a little cheaper than someone who doesn't know how much that is. So just working with them back and forth.
So you learned bartering skills also.
Indian, a little bit.
Because you went to several marketplaces there and bought a couple of, you are a musician, you're an artist, and you're a musician in theater. Tell us, can you show us what you brought with us and tell us a little bit about it?
Okay, well, first thing here, I was really fascinated by all the thread art I ended up seeing. And of course, all this it looks like it's hand done. I've seen past the frame. So I found it very fascinating that someone would take the time to just go through and make that whole scene just out of thread rather than, with like a brush where you have a bit more or a bit less work to do.
And you all had the opportunity to visit communities like this, or at least ride by on the boat trip, is that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And you also are a fan of music, a drum major at your high school, is that right? So obviously you bought some music. What do you have there?
This is a flute I bought in Suzhou while we were staying there. I had never really played flute. I've tried to play this. Unfortunately, I haven't learned it.
So he asked me to please not ask him to do so.
I've been playing instruments since 6th grade and been fascinated with music since long before then, so I figured at least pick something up from China that was musical.
Now, Randall, you mentioned to me when we talked previously that the emphasis on education there, as it relates to the students and their perspective, is a bit different than here in the United States. Tell us a little bit about that and what you saw as different.
Yeah, so in Suzhou, we got to spend a lot of time at their Suzhou No. 6 middle school, and it was an art school. And a lot of the students there we got to talk with, and one in particular told us how she would go to school in the morning at about 7:30, 8 o'clock, stay there till about 3, and have a lunch break in between. But then afterwards, she would go to a music class. Like, I think she was learning violin.
I believe so.
Yeah, violin. And so she would go to that, and then right after that, she would go to a cram school because they have to take what's called the Gaokao to get into college, and so they would go to cram schools for that. And so they spent a majority of their day in the school, which is completely different from what we do. It was crazy.
And what do you think about their thoughts on education, and how did that change how you think about education and how the focus here is?
Well,
I think you said we're whiners.
Yeah, we're whiners, we really are. I definitely think that they hold education to a higher esteem. Not saying that we don't think education is a very good thing. They take it really to another length, I'd say, and make sure through really vigorous work that their students are prepared. One could say they almost do it too much. One could say not enough. It's just a matter of opinion. But I think that they're definitely very different than we are when it comes to education.
Well, now you met a student that you keep in contact with there in China. You all stayed in a hotel for most of your stay, but you had the opportunity to have an in-home visit with a Chinese family. Can you talk about that experience, what that was like?
The homestay experience was even better. The trip was great in all. The homestay was just a little something, kind of like a cherry on top of a cake or something, if you will. Getting to just go with the family to a different part of Suzhou. We went to a part called Ancient Suzhou, which is, of course, where Suzhou had started. And I got to see part of the Suzhou that not a lot of tourists see. I got to see these small, little crowded streets, like even more so than what we had saw. and there were canals, and there were people there, and there was all sorts of merchants. Even though there were probably not really many tourists there that go there, there were still a ton of merchants that were there just working day in and day out, just trying to sell anything they can.
And how was your Mandarin? Were you pretty well equipped to communicate with the family in their native language?
Unfortunately, I wish I would have been more equipped to, but I did what I could with what I was given.
Motivation. Gotta love apps. You all had an app, didn't you? Which you had to use. That sounds like a very memorable experience. You also had a memorable yet challenging experience. Please share.
Yes, so we went to a cat cafe. And I don't even know what...
Not cat, I thought the same thing.
It was a cat, no. Well, it was a cat cafe. You went in, and to go in, the whole purpose of it was you went in and ate food and, had drinks around cats. And so we went in there, and I had to, use my Chinese to tell them how to get a to-go cup. And I tried every single thing I could trying to tell them trying to say to-go cup. And I was using like complicated words and everything.
Charades?
Yeah, charades, and I just could not, for the life of me, get them to figure it out. And then we finally got someone to translate between us. And then we ended up going back to class and realizing that it was really simple, just beizi. And I was trying like really, really complicated words for styrofoam. So it was
How did you
really
figure that
difficult.
out? How did you figure it out? I think you said you saw someone walking out with a to-go plate.
And I pointed at it, and I was like that right there.
Well, it sounds like an unforgettable experience. Now, having gone through that and had this opportunity, what was your thought process like on the way back? And what would you share with other students about this experience?
Oh, I definitely think that it was a memorable experience, absolutely, and that anyone who has the chance should go. I mean, even as a student or as an adult, they should really go and visit, whether it be China or another culture, just to experience how it feels to be in a new place. I think it's really important.
And what you said that you thought you learned a commonality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that even though we're really different, that learning the language, learning the cultures of these different countries, like I said, whether it be China or even while we were there, we were with like people from Spain and Italy and Australia and Canada and South Korea, and being able to experience that with these different countries brought us together as more friends and we understand each other more, and we were able to bash down some of the American stereotypes, as along with learn more about them and get rid of some of our stereotypes.
Understanding is the key. Well, 谢谢 to both of you.
谢谢, 谢谢.
Which means thank you in Chinese. Thanks, everyone. Give a round of applause. Head that way.